there are limitations in all healthcare sectors,
Correct.
not just this country,
Yes.
where the numbers will surpass the amount of doctors and nurses to provide that quality care. We're talking about holding a patient's hand, giving them the support, emotional support that they need, advice. That gap, you are providing that pivotal gap, so that really makes you stand out from all other NGOs as far as my experience goes.
Yes, I actually go into the homes also of the patient.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
Respond
wanna-
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'd ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
WESN.
What's worse? High crime statistics, a high murder rate, 600 plus murders, or a handful of high profile incidents? In the grand scheme of things, when compared to things like how many that died in COVID and how many that died to the murder rate, something like the Paria tragedy, statistically speaking, if you just analyze it in a very brutal, unemotional manner, you can come to a robotic conclusion that it's irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, it was only 4 victims, as opposed to, again, if you compare it to the entirety of the murder rate. That does not speak to the potential of accidents like that happening again. That doesn't speak to the potential prevention that was neglected in accidents like that. But then on the other hand, you could look at all murders and say, in theory, all of them could have been prevented. Statistically, we probably will never have 0 murders, because there will always be those cases where the perpetrator has actual, not just claim, but actual no concern about being caught. So a single incident statistically is not as relevant. A single quadruple homicide in and of itself cannot compare to 600 and something murders in a year. But despite the fact that the murder rate has come down, there is an article in today's papers that is saying fear is still high under the UNC, even though crime is down. Now, to what extent is that a narrative? To what extent is that a true reflection of our citizens' experience? The murder rate is down. I do not necessarily feel safer. But that doesn't mean that that feeling is accurate. More than ever before, and I don't necessarily blame anyone for this. I don't have these feelings and then shake my fist to the sky and say, darn you, so-and-so government. It is what it is. On some level, yes, we are potentially prisoners in our own home. Safety, just being outside of the house, night, day, doesn't really matter. Maybe I'm overly cautious. So maybe my feelings that I am unsafe, maybe that's not a proper reflection of the population. And even if the people felt that way, one of the odd things about leadership and governance is sometimes the population will feel something that isn't necessarily true. But then on the other hand, sometimes it doesn't matter if it is true or not. The fear is true, yes, but the cause of the fear might not necessarily be true, right? It's not as though we have murders happening in every community on every street corner. However, the flip side of that is sometimes it doesn't matter if the fear is practical. Because at the end of the day, human beings are reacting. Whether it is an accurate reaction or an inaccurate reaction, leadership should be asking why. One of the reasons why I am disturbed over what happened over the course of the weekend is due to reports on the quadruple homicide. 30 spent shells of 5.56 ammunition, 15 9mm shells. So I wasn't entirely sure what type of firearms was used on Sunday night. Now the reports say, at the minimum, one rifle, and if it was only one rifle, one automatic rifle, that was 5.56. If it was that, then they used a full clip, emptied it into the car, plus a full clip of a handgun, assuming they got, it's illegal, so I assume it should not be an issue for them to get a 15-round clip for some sort of 9mm handgun. So at least 2 shooters, because of 2 different types of ammunition, 2 different guns. Or at least 2 firearms, maybe that's better to say. This might be the first time throughout the whole SOE experience where we could say this murder situation, this quadruple homicide, is about as bad as any mass casualty or multiple casualty, because we're not talking about 20 people. We're talking about 3, 4 at a time. But at the height of the 600+ murder rate, it was more or less this. Yes, other scenes might have had 50, 60 shells fired, bullets fired at the general target. Unfortunately, all of the victims were in a car, so it was relatively easy for the perpetrators to wipe out the occupants. And on some level, they may not have even known a child was in the car, at least not until it was too late, depending on how much effort they put into identifying who was in the car. This murder is about as bad as any murder that took place at the height of the years where we had 600 murders. Except what makes it worse is it's during a state of emergency. And this is not some murder that was, in some distant part of the country. One of the reports is basically giving us testimony, mostly anonymously, some from residents about their experience. And one of the things that at least one of our citizens has said is, well, It's nothing new. I saw 2 men got lit up a while ago. I hear bullets almost every night, sometimes from over in Chinapoo, so it's not shocking as such because it's an area like that. Now, one of the things with regards to all of this is the response from the government. Because again, statistically speaking, when the murder rate was 600 plus, you were probably, statistically speaking, more likely to be the victim of violence as compared to now, when the murder rate is around 300 plus, right? Not saying that you can't be a victim of violence now. Probability is not a guarantee, it's not a certainty. And the difference in probability probably is smaller than we think. But the fact of the matter is, you know, in a very general, basic sense of analysis, we're talking oversimplification. Yes, when the murder rate is higher and you don't have a state of emergency, the odds of you being the victim of a violent crime that could lead to your death would technically be higher. And yet we're just as afraid, and maybe more so now. The reason why some people might be more afraid now than before is, with a state of emergency, certain things are not being resolved. After, at this point, just about over a year. So people have a fear, and it could be a trick of human perception. How do you combat that? Because impractical fear, inaccurate fear, sensationalization that causes the public to respond to something in a negative fashion unnecessarily can have detrimental effects on a society, detrimental effects on an economy, detrimental effects on how we treat each other. And of course, it can have detrimental effects on political approval ratings. Something that I do wonder, to what extent, granted, how accurate are they ever, has been a big question with regards to the recent happenings in politics in the Western world. But there is what we measure, whether it's accurate or not, and then there's what is, whether we know it or not. What is the government's approval rating on crime? I have no idea. How fair is it if the approval rating takes a hit while the murder rate is down? But again, how do you combat this sort of thing? How do you combat this sort of perception? How do you combat a population that might actually have an unreasonable assumption of how things are going in the country, because we don't necessarily have all the data. We know what the murder rate is, but that's not a complete picture. At the end of the day, if the murder rate is 600 and something, the population is 1.4 million. The odds of you dying to a random bullet just walking out your house, while it's not impossible, while it's not zero, it's not that high. Things are not that dangerous yet, where we cannot leave our homes and do the business that at the very minimum has to be done. If we have to go outside, if we have to go to the grocery, if we have to do errands, we could do it with some reasonable degree of safety, with a significantly reasonable expectation of coming home. But at the end of the day, the emotions of our population, like public relations in general, because they're connected, doesn't have to be reasonable. Just like how PR isn't always fair. So how do you combat this? Because a loss in confidence, an extreme example is when you had the Great Depression. The confidence in the economy, this is also an oversimplification, bottomed out. when you had a run on financial institutions. Why? It's because the confidence in those institutions bottoms out. It's not as though financial institutions at times have enough liquidity to cover 100% of their depositors and debts. No. Usually, on any given Sunday, on any given Friday, on any given Monday, they have a fraction in terms of liquid cash available to pay out for those depositors that might demand their money now. So, of course, the last thing you want is you run on a financial institution because they will never have enough liquid cash to pay off everybody if everybody decides at the same time, hey, I no longer have confidence in this institution, I want to pull my money out. Hence, CLICO. How do you stop these things? With leadership. It is difficult for a population to always be correct. It is difficult for a population to always forestall any sort of sensationalized narrative that goes viral, that spreads amongst itself, that is a self-feeding, self-generating engine of doubt and fear. You need leadership to combat it. Now, on some level, for the sake of objectivity, I feel the need to put this disclaimer up front. The political leader of the Patriotic Front has made some statements. She herself has not always been the most active or present public official, at least during her time as political leader of a party she founded. And in many ways, the population probably has a lot more confidence in her than she herself displays in herself based on her own actions. Let me leave it there. So take this with a little bit of grain of salt, or at least those who have analyzed the situation deeper might not want to take on this opinion because of the speaker. If you know, you know. But at the same time, I'll say don't necessarily shoot down the message just because of the messenger. Just have eyes wide open. Because Michaela Pandey has called out the Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, for engaging in quote-unquote TikTok governance, which is technically not accurate because she doesn't use TikTok, she uses X and Facebook, and she doesn't use video, she uses text. Which in a way is worse because at least with video, we would see her. We would see the leader. Prime Minister is essentially the leader, right? The political leader of a party, right, is the leader of a party. But for a country, that's the Prime Minister. With TikTok, at least we would see her. See her emotional response. See her demeanor. See her tone. See and hear and to some extent feel her delivery and her emotional state when engaging on various subject matters that are important. And this, I would argue, is an important subject matter, in part because they campaigned on this. The opposition is attempting, or will attempt, if they haven't already, but as from what I understand, they are already starting to attempt, to politically campaign, to lay a foundation to politically campaign on crime. And our Prime Minister is behind a text-based social media platform. That means we can't even be guaranteed that it's her. We don't know if she's the one typing out these messages or if it's a staffer. Famously, in Trump's first term, United States President, in his first term, there was a certain tone of some of his tweets, now exposed, but at that time I think they were still tweets. And then there was a different tone at times from some of his tweets. And then the assumption, I don't think it was ever proven, at least not for every single post, the assumption is a staffer was putting together the more, or at least somebody was telling him what to type, was putting together the more technical, the more functionary stuff, while the more crazy stuff, like Kofefe, came from the man himself. Now, we don't necessarily have that. But anyone that follows any sort of enterprise where they have public-facing roles, where they're public figures, particularly in the entertainment industries and the like, you know that social media is not always something that the actual individual is engaging in. They'll have a person to do that on top of a publicist and a manager. They'll have a whole team. And part of that team will be to manage their accounts. Now, our politicians generally, seemingly, and anecdotally I have heard, do not necessarily follow the advice of public relations professionals, of mass communication professionals who are part of their staff, but they have a staff. I don't know if most of what is reported to be from the Prime Minister's social media accounts was not put together by her staff or not. So at a time when you can make a case that when one of our local papers has a headline, "Crime down but fare still high under the UNC," and this story, which was published on their website 9 hours ago, I assume is printed in today's papers. The front page, of course, references the murders. And by doing that, it's shocking. It's sensationalized. Now, on one hand, it's the truth. And if you downplay it, you'll be accused of trying to cover something up. And then if you put it out front and center, you can be accused of potentially overplaying it. So it's not easy for editorial responsibility to be, what is the correct tone for things like this? How do we come across as not exploiting the situation for viewership and clicks and whatever perceived political bias we might have? I understand all that. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Once it's not a lie, it should be able to go out there, right? And our murder rate is almost half of what it was at its height. That should account for something. But do people feel safer? The answer to that, generally speaking, is probably not. How do you now help the situation? How do you instill confidence back into the system, back into the inner workings of society with leadership, with good messaging? By allowing the people the chance to understand what's going on so that they don't make incorrect assumptions about the situation and about you. And what is the Prime Minister doing? The opposite of that. I would argue. She is at the UWI Debe campus. I understand it's a legacy project, right? That was, I believe, her last public appearance, which was yesterday. I get it. It's a big deal to her. But I think at this point, does anyone not notice a pattern with these so-called legacy projects? What is one of the stains of the Pandey administration? Piarco Airport. What is one of the stains of Mr. Manning's administration? While it has gotten good use, all of the deals and maneuverings and all of the contracts with regards to things like the waterfront, all the hullabaloo with which contractor from where and who and the Chinese this and the what have you, and local contractors say we're not getting contracts. What about the Dr. Keith Rowley administration? Well, we had another airport, ironically. Can't finish yet. They race to try to get it done to open it before the election, before he retired, which I don't understand why nobody thought, no one is really going to associate that project with him, because it's not operational long after he left. And what about the current Prime Minister? Well, there was the Couva Hospital, which on some level, I have heard pros and cons for it, defenses for it, and justifications of why it, how it was implemented, where it was built, was unnecessary. Not that her political opponents could repeat most of those claims without a pot calling kettle black situation, but the Couva Hospital wasn't necessarily a project that would have undermined Prime Minister Persaud Bissessa's legacy. It didn't necessarily have quite the faults that you would have with, say, Piarco or Napa from Mr. Manning. That is a fiasco. When it was finished, it was a fiasco. It probably, as a performance space, as an actual, what's supposed to be a professional, modern performance space, a complete fiasco. No fault to the people managing it. But we basically gave them dirt and said, hey, cook a steak. It's not some potentially unnecessary white elephant like the new Tobago airport. We don't even know if there's a market for that. At least with the Couva Children's Hospital, there might have been a market for it. Nationally speaking, might not have been the best place to put it, but now we have this Debe South campus, which as a project might overall not be that bad. But then, hey, the waterfront was also a decent project. Part of it is not necessarily if the project is worthy. The Piarco Airport was a worthy project, but rather, what is the leader doing when they're trying to push through their legacy? What is the opportunity cost at the time for their legacy? Mr. Manning pushed through his legacy, and it actually isn't a bad legacy, but on some level it cost him his time in office. His legacy, his push for it, partially or significantly contributed to his downfall, not because of what it was, but because of how he handled the whole situation. So while the Prime Minister is concerned about her legacy project, I am here wondering, is she taking the society of Trinidad and Tobago for granted? And then you could have a whole set of conspiracy theories about demographics and geographics and whose area has the most crime and what race with what crime and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, anyone that wants to make those arguments could go take a hike. Not because of anything I said, but because of what the Prime Minister said. Because of what her party and what she herself campaigned on. The UNC did not campaign on, we will fix things for those areas that vote for the UNC. That's not what was promised in the election. It was everybody wins. Everybody does not conveniently come with fine print that we have to squint to read that says, except for P&M areas that have high crime. If you don't want to make certain promises, if you don't want to follow through with them, don't make them. Just don't make them. Be upfront. There are people who I very much dislike their approach when it comes to political ideology on a lot of issues that are at this point international. But the one thing that I have to acknowledge is they're upfront about their nonsense. They're upfront about their biases. They're upfront about the things that we might not like about them, at least some of them. So I know where they're coming from and I know what to disregard. So of course now, when Michaela Pandey says that the Prime Minister is engaging in TikTok governance, I have been saying this for months now. Where is the Prime Minister? Or during this time of potential crisis, where is she? Why have we not seen her? Because at the end of the day, you could say what you want about Dr. Keith Rowley. There's a lot that you could legitimately criticize him for. There's a lot that he has no real excuse for, that he has no real justification for. There's a lot that they are not even pretending to have a semi-decent cover-up. They're not even trying to fool us with some of the stupid things that they did while in office. But there's one thing that you can't take from him. Whether you like what he had to say or not, he went in front of cameras, said his piece, right? We heard from him, more often than not criticized him for it, and then he took questions from reporters, and then we criticized him at times for those answers too, but the fact of the matter was, he did that. He was there. He presented himself. There was some level of accountability. And I'm not saying he was more accountable than the current Prime Minister. But in some areas, he presented himself to be held to account in a manner that we don't necessarily see from the current government. There was even one situation where they had a press conference for, I believe, the state of emergency. Only one media house was in the room when the press conference was had. And I'll give you a hint, it wasn't a privately owned media house. Quote, end the digital performance, deal with the crisis. Now, there's a lot that may or may not have happened with regards to the murder in the police station. I find it very disturbing that the leadership in this situation thinks, you know what, it's a one-off, nothing to see here, don't worry about it. Even with potential explanations that actually might make such a stance reasonable to some extent with regards to this is not likely to happen again. Even with that, and I don't necessarily agree that there is such a stance, regardless of what the information that they have says and how they interpret the facts of the matter that they know that we don't know. Just saying, well, it's a one-off and it's an inside job, and essentially trying to get us to not worry about it is ridiculous. And it's ridiculous when you consider the lack of leadership and the lack of concern. Which is funny, because usually when something happens and you see the politician run to the cameras to give a statement, you know, the cynical part of your brain says, look at this fool looking for a photo opportunity again. Look at this fool trying to pretend to be something. But the point is, we don't even have that. Quote, people do not measure safety by tweets, graphics, or carefully curated social media posts. They measure safety by whether their children come home alive, whether gun shops wake them up at night, whether police stations are secure, and whether families can live without fear. If the country is safer, why do we not feel it? Again, I have no problem on an academic level on questioning that last statement, the accuracy of that last statement, the veracity of that last statement. But the problem is, when you understand how a population works, and for the life of me, I do not understand why a political party gets into government and then all of a sudden, and I know it's not easy. I know if I was in a position, I will make mistakes too. Most of us will. And those who won't make mistakes, they probably migrated away. We lost our best and brightest. That's a whole other point. But the one thing I won't do, I think, I would like to believe, I will not act so surprised about a population responding in a manner by which populations have responded to critical situations for decades upon decades. This is not the first time where our population might be overreacting to something on a purely academic level, on a purely technical level. This would not be the first time. I just don't understand why politicians, I don't understand. I don't understand. What is there not to understand? You withhold information from the public. They don't have the full picture. I don't have the full picture. Others in the media don't have the full picture. So we can't help you. We can't help you sort out the mess. Don't expect us to. And then now when the population goes down a path you don't want them to go, you don't understand how they could say this and say that. As though your country is alien to you. As though the people that you begged to elect you and how they think and what they feel, all of that is alien to you. How could you promise a population that everybody will win and you can't even respond in a basic manner to critical situations? To do the basics of what I believe at this point now, 2026, we will expect, in part, whether fair or unfair. We've seen other jurisdictions, governments and leadership, when situations happen, when crises are full-blown, we're in the middle of whatever. It could be a perceived crisis, it could be a real crisis. How do they respond? How does leadership respond? How do the public figures respond? We've seen all of it. And on some level, you don't need a $1 trillion budget to hold a press conference and to have some capacity to try to explain things to a population, to level with the people, to be somewhat transparent, to ensure that they receive enough information that they are satisfied that enough is being held accountable in whatever the situation is. And we are legitimately trying to do our best to solve the problem. Declaring that, quote, crime is winning, unquote, Pandey said citizens no longer judge safety based on official updates or social media messaging, but on their lived reality. And that is the danger. You cannot combat what you think is bad information and speculation by just claiming it's wrong and then moving on to your pet project. And I understand, it's not that the South Campus isn't important. It's just in the immediate time frame, not the priority for the majority of Trimbagonians. Because it's not as though your presence there, while we just had what happened this weekend, your presence is not going to make the difference between a successful campus or not, because you could have gone next week. And before anybody says anything about the deficiencies of the PNM, that don't matter right now. That don't matter right now. Whatever the PNM did wrong, they face the consequences for that action, for those actions. Whatever they did wrong, they face the consequences. The consequences was you got voted out. Believe it or not, everything I'm saying here today is not to say, UNC bad. It is to say, things are not going well, improve it. Because if you don't, you'll be voted out. Citizens no longer judge safety based on official updates or social media messaging, but on their lived reality. And the danger with that is they will start to ignore you. They will start to ignore you when you have legitimate news to bring to them. When you have legitimate statistics to bring to them. They will start to ignore you because I believe on some level the Minister of Homeland Security could say the right thing half the time, and the people won't care anymore because they're too accustomed to when he says nonsense. So there was one of the last times he spoke to the public, he was leveling with the people and saying some truths. But at that point, I think it didn't matter to the people. It didn't matter anymore. On some level, when Fitzgerald Hines did speak, he technically, a lot of the time, didn't say the wrong thing. It's just that his messaging did not matter. It did not matter because the people didn't care what he had to say. Eventually, they just were done with him. They were done with him. And whatever he said, they disregarded. And thus, he was no longer effective in the role, because the role is not to be a grand tactician. The role is to be the civilian oversight coordinator of our national security apparatus, the liaison between cabinet and the protective services. And on some level, there is a certain amount of leadership function there, even though he does not have direct control authority, because the government has to set their budgets. The government has to set policy. The government has to implement legislation. And eventually, he said mostly empty nothing, so the people disregarded him when he had pertinent things to say. And now I think the same thing, the government is at risk of this happening. Yes, your diehard supporters will always love you. But I didn't realize that political parties look to get elected in order to only placate their supporters. I didn't realize that the nature of the business was to immediately do everything you can to lose the support of the non-decided voters. Now, the opposition leader is blaming the Prime Minister, accusing of abdication of responsibility. She's accusing the Prime Minister of attempting to, quote, downplay and distance herself from the government's poor handling of a national crime crisis, end quote. Now, on one hand, I'm not sure if I necessarily saw it quite this way. But on the other hand, with regards to how they spoke on the police station killing, I think there's some merit to it. Or at the very least, it's an opinion that I can't discredit offhand. Regardless of what details come out in the future, the opinion is based on the circumstances by which the Commissioner of Police and the Prime Minister made certain statements. Those circumstances potentially include the vacuum that they left by not necessarily giving out all the information when they made those statements to justify the statements. So it doesn't necessarily always matter if the statement is accurate or not, but rather no attempt of analysis was made to try to determine exactly how will the population respond to these statements given the lack of context, given the lack of information, given the lack of detail, and are we shooting ourselves in the foot? I would answer yes. But more importantly, the opposition leader brings up a very, very good point. Because let's not forget that Penelope Beckles has been criticized over and over and over again for her lack of charisma, for her lack of personality, for her lack of fire, for her lack of energy. Right? Over and over and over again. That's cute. But on a practical level, now would you say that our Prime Minister, yes, it is still our Prime Minister, would you say that our Prime Minister is more charismatic, has more fire, has a more engaging personality than the opposition leader? Yeah, you might say that, right? Yeah. But the opposition leader brings up a good point. Quote, where is the love from the Prime Minister? As the nation is in mourning for an innocent 9-year-old child, a police officer murdered in a police station, reports of mass illegal burials, missing firearms, and a deepening national crime crisis. The Prime Minister is failing to lead the nation and has chosen to distract rather than address these issues. Just by the way, my opinions and my course of argument, ironically, are not based on this statement. I have had these opinions, and I have been looking at it from this lens and this perspective. I have now read this for the first time. Just so you know, I take no cues from the opposition. We just happen to agree on this point. Because one of the times when I actually felt very appreciative and proud of our Prime Minister was that first post-cabinet press briefing at the Red House, where she both showed me something good and she said something bad. The something bad was saying we'll find the money. Doesn't seem like you're managing very well on that front, or no better than your predecessor. But the good was we saw some amount of truth out of her, because she almost leveled with us. She almost leveled with us. She kind of undermined any argument that she did so by saying we'll find the money, thereby trying to downplay the situation. But initially, from her, the look on her face, her demeanor, and her words up until the point she said we'll find the money, she was coming across as genuine concern, dare I say heartache, for the state of the economy and what it meant with regards to the difficulty that we probably will have to go through in the next coming years. And it didn't come across as though she was upset about the fact that the Treasury was poor and she's in power and she doesn't have the ability to do anything. She was not upset about the fact that there wasn't money to thief. No, she came across to me that she had deep concern for the nation. And if you tweaked a few things, it could have been the beginning of great leadership, where she could have started to manage our expectations on what can or cannot happen legitimately, so that we would understand where the government is coming from and be in lockstep behind them to support whatever it is that is necessary to get us out of the economic doldrums we find ourselves in. But she kind of threw all of that potential away when she said we'll find the money and left it at that. And now we see where the money is attempting to be found. It's a hell of a thing. But that was a point in time where she stood up and she led. And the early days she was leading. She was present. She was vocal, which is funny, which is ironic, because the early days of Dr. Keith Rowley's administration, he put his ministers more to the forefront until they slowly failed one by one with public communications, and then he had to speak more. But the Prime Minister, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, she was up front on the campaign trail. She was up front at the initial press conferences. And now, where is she? She complained that Dr. Keith Rowley was not at the press conference to announce the state of emergency in December 30th, 2024. She's had 2 state of emergencies and 1 significant extension. All 3 press conferences, she's been absent. You do it once, all right, fine. You could excuse it. You could potentially disregard it. You do it twice, but it seems like on so many instances, not just with crime and not just with the state of emergency, she's doing it all the time. I mean, let's not forget there was a home invasion in proximity to her own residence. They say neighbors, but it's not necessarily that the house was right next door. But still, relatively speaking, we're not talking about, well, she's in South and it happened in South. No, we're talking about the same area, the same community. Rural, urban, squeezed up in a small space, spread out in a large space. It doesn't matter. It happened in the same community. So, you know, you didn't have to tour the DB campus early this week. You didn't have to tour it Monday after the weekend that we had. Or at the very least, you could have given a bit more attention to the situation than you did. I believe she spoke. All right, let's take a break. When I come back, I'll get into the more recent reports with regards to the details that have been thus revealed with regards to the raid on the police station in San Fernando. Let's take a break. We'll get to that after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 6861662 and start building your future.
The home of Caribbean content is growing, and we welcome you to be a part of the #1 platform for young personalities who are driven to make a positive impact in society. As we continue to reach every corner of Trinidad and Tobago through our daily broadcasts, our social media pages, or through our 75+ digital billboards across the nation, contact us to learn about our competitive rates via marketing@wesncc.com or call us at 628-5835. WESN Content Capital, television with a difference.
Remember waking up early just to catch your favorite cartoons? WESN brings back those magical mornings with Retro Saturdays.
Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
Where the young at heart relive the fun. Join us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward and our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That's why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Back here and talking about the WSND content capital, and of course more information has come out with regards to the attack on the municipal police station in San Fernando. One of the things is, I believe the head of municipal police, or at least one of the heads, confirmed that it was a facility that stored weapons not just for the officers stationed or based out of there, but also for other facilities. Now, exactly what the arrangement was or the procedure was is not entirely clear to me, but at the end of the day, not only is it that they had an armory of a large amount of weaponry because it wasn't just for their station, but also the estimates on the amount of firearms might actually be more than was initially reported. Now there are news reports that more than 100 guns might have been stolen, right? Not necessarily giving us, I believe, a breakdown of what those firearms could be. Some firearms have been recovered. Mostly it's semi-automatic pistols. One shotgun, I believe, on one MPX was recovered. So at least two of the more high-powered weapons out of the initially reported 10 have been recovered, taken off the streets. But this whole situation has a lot of questions. The chief one of all, right, which was asked by our own media ambassador yesterday, is what was the motivation behind this crime? One of the other things that have come out from the reports now that an autopsy has been done, is that what was misidentified as a gunshot wound to the neck has been clarified to be a stabbing, and that the officer died from a combination of blunt force trauma, stabbing, and strangulation. Of course, the assumption would be that, because I believe she was stabbed in the neck, that might have been the most fatal injury, the injury most central to her cause of death. But I'm not entirely sure, and at some point, for our purposes, it doesn't matter. It answers the question with regards to how could this have happened and nobody known? Well, no gunshots were there to be heard. What made that question even more pertinent was the fact that it has also come out that there were other police officers that were supposed to be on the scene. Right? Now, it's not necessarily clear to me why they were not downstairs present when whatever happened, happened. Two municipal police officers were part of the 6 arrested. 6 arrested. So one of the other things is that I have issues with the commissioner is why exactly is he saying that this is not an attack on police or this is not a coordinated situation, but it's a one-off? Well, let me get the other. Because he keeps saying, I maintain that it was not a targeted attack against law enforcement. The situation as we currently understand it is a situation that has never occurred before in Trinidad. Well, the thing is, I kind of understand what he's trying to say, but I don't really fully understand what he's trying to say. Because they didn't just kill the officer. They got up close and personal. She was beaten, strangled, and stabbed. Other things might have happened. And then they raided an armory, which now might be 102 firearms, not just 62 firearms. Notice the difference. We're talking about 40 more than was initially reported. And just the fact of taking police guns in and of itself is a much more complicated situation than smuggling in a random illegal weapon which might have had its serial number filed off and what have you. It brings a different level of heat. It brings a different level of traceability. Because the ballistic profiles of the guns, you could try and make the guns unidentifiable with regards to markings and stuff as much as you like. If you get caught with such a gun, the ballistic testing will confirm that it came from the police station, and then you will be indirectly or directly linked to the death of a police officer. This whole thing is extremely messy. And it goes back to what ASP Arun was saying yesterday. What was the end game for the people involved? Because they already arrested 6 people. And this is not something where it looks as though, well, they were a crew looking to steal guns. And they just happened to attack a police station. So when the commissioner says it is not something targeted to law enforcement, exactly what do you mean by that? It has been reported they potentially went in there. 2 municipal police officers. So it was an inside job. It's not targeted. What? It wasn't intentional? I don't understand. Because this crime literally could only happen to police officers. Done by police officers. And it's 6 people that were arrested for it. The implication is potentially 6 are involved. Were the 2 municipal police that were arrested, were they arrested because of a precautionary measure? Were they her colleagues, and in the course of, trying to question them about what happened, you arrested them because maybe they had some proximity to the situation, that it's not necessarily clear of their involvement, or were they directly involved? What about the other 4? What is the basis of the arrest? We don't know. Let's go with what probably would be the assumption most people will make, that these are suspects that directly were involved. Because they said it's an inside job. Well, yeah, an inside job. Think about it, as a police officer, you're conducting an inside job. Is that not something that you're targeting towards the police? Is it that he's trying to say that this situation won't repeat itself? Well, dare I say, what is the end game for an officer with regards to that inside job? Because if he could get away with it once, or she, then the inside man or woman could get away with it again, or at least believe so. One of the things that this has brought up, and to be fair to the commissioner, and to be fair to the TTPS, because I've had, I believe, at the very least, Ashraf, during his time as media ambassador, bring up this point to me. So this is not a now for now thing, or we now make this up, or it's now an issue. Because of what happened, now they want to make it an issue. No. The police, or at least the rank and file at the very least, recognize this issue. Because we have this problem where all police wear the same uniform, but not all police are members of the TTPS. And not all police are directly linked to the command structure of the TTPS. Therefore, the Commissioner of Police is not responsible for them. And the police service is not responsible for them. And we're talking pretty larceny. You could say to some extent port police, which is different to the officers of the Airports Authority. Because at least those officers, they have different uniforms. But the port police, they wear the gray and blues, right? The municipal police, SRPs, not all of them are directly accountable in the same manner that TTPS officers are to the Commissioner of Police and to that reporting structure. Now, the Commissioner has said it, and Gary Griffin has said it. Gary Griffin has said, this is one report, the case exposes gaps in oversight, arguing municipal police operate as a parallel police organization. They are technically under the Ministry of Local Government. They're not even under the Ministry of National Security. And they have firearms with limited accountability to the Commissioner of Police. Quote, you cannot have a parallel organization. The municipal police should come under the umbrella of the Commissioner of Police. Well, at the very least, it should come under the umbrella of the Ministry of National Security. But you see, it seems as though the municipal police was an attempt to mimic the structure of policing in larger countries where a city might have its own police force. You know, a county might have its own sheriff's office. The problem with that is we're not that big. Now, in Los Angeles, they have a sheriff's county, and they also have a police department, right? So they have different jurisdictions because there's the wider LA County, I believe, or what have you, and then there's the city of LA that has the police department. And I could be getting those things wrong, but the point is, you know, they're big enough for that. Do we need a municipal police department? Because it's not as though the local municipal police carry out all the police functions in their areas of jurisdiction. Because that is generally the case, as far as I understand it, in Los Angeles. The Sheriff's Department, they have their areas of jurisdiction, and the Police Department have their areas of jurisdiction. But here, our police service, which is essentially national, their jurisdiction is the whole country. So you have a parallel organization that is to provide exactly what extra service. And then now comes the question, right? Because a senior officer, municipal police officer said, officers receive initial training, but there is no formal system of ongoing psychological assessments, citing budgetary constraints. And I would argue, because the implications of his statement is, to what extent do they have enough training for things like this? Because at the very least, there was some kind of breach in security. Now, was it the inside man, or was it laxness with regards to municipal police officers? We don't know for sure, right? There's some CCTV footage. We don't know what was covered or was not covered, what was revealed, what was not revealed. But as the former commissioner said, the lack of coordination led to duplication of resources, with both services sometimes assigned to the same duties. And because of that, the police service, and this has been said multiple times, included by Gary Griffith, they are going to take the blame for what the municipal police does because they wear the same uniforms. They present themselves the same way. And listen, the other police, they want it so because they want to be seen as legitimate police. The problem is the police service technically is not responsible for them, has no real oversight of them, doesn't control them, does not train them, cannot discipline them. Again, they're not even in the same ministry. It seems as though they're going to change the municipal police system, right? Now, on some level, I don't know to what extent, because I've said this about the regiment and the Coast Guard, and to some extent the police service. Like other areas of the public sector, it's a jobs program. It's a eat a food situation for some people. They don't actually want to be cops. They just want a steady job. Right? They don't actually want to be soldiers. And on some level, all of these national security services, at the very least, you can't necessarily say every police officer is involved in this. But on some level, they're like a mini gang unto themselves. They might not necessarily do all the things that a criminal gang would do, but when they're ready, some of them act like a gang unto themselves, because we's police. They had one situation where, I heard this anecdotal story. The police have their lights and sirens flashing. That's what they're doing before someone breaks the orange light, right? So he proceeds forward on an orange light because he's more or less at the threshold. So you might as well cross it. He can't just stay there. And the police apparently interpret him as breaking the red light. It was green when you passed, right? Now, I don't know what the timing was because the driver was driving slowly. So it's not as though he was far off in the distance. I was trying to rush the light. So by that measure, they follow him. And then when eventually they get his attention to stop, they're upset. Why didn't he notice that the flashing lights and sirens that was on before he did anything that can be interpreted as anything was somehow all of a sudden an indication of him to stop? And then the big issue was that they felt disrespected. Not about road safety or anything like that, because it wasn't a case where, you know, an accident could have happened, right? No, they felt disrespected. So they wrote him a ticket. And the long and short is, if you don't necessarily, because I'm just giving a bare bones of the story. They told him contest it in court. It took a few years, he contested it in court, the judge threw it out. And it took 2 minutes for the judge to throw it out. So I might not have expressed the story properly, but the point is, the judge heard enough, it didn't take long, out. Why do I bring that up? Because it almost seemed more like the police were in that situation, the officers in that situation were acting more like a gang that felt disrespected because you're doing stuff that we don't agree with on our turf. You don't have permission, how dare you? As opposed to, you're breaking the law in front of us, we can't just let this pass. That's not the energy that they approach the situation with. They approach the situation as though it was a person in front of them, and how dare you, bam, take a ticket. The lack of professionalism, and then on top of that now, we have a call, so I'll take the call. The lack of professionalism now, it's one thing for the police service to have issues like this. It's another thing for other services that wear a similar uniform, right, that have police in their name, that compound the situation. We have a money line. Caller, good morning, you're on here.
John Michael Small, good morning to you.
Morning.
And to Trinidad and Tobago. I want to add a spanner to the works here while listening to you.
Yeah.
Doesn't WASA have its own separate police?
Yeah.
Doesn't TNTech also have their own police?
I don't know.
Both of whom are armed, and both of whom have the power of arrest.
No. You're fine. Keep going. I can hear you.
All right. Understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And this is what we as the population have to look at. Because WASA have their own police, TNTech have their own police. Both of them are armed. Do they fall under the jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago Police Service? Those are questions we would like answered. But I will tell you what irked me yesterday. You see the statement that this is an internal matter? That irked me. And why it irked me? When these two gentlemen who performed the Seniors Act got these guns, let us say for argument's sake, they didn't find none. What are they going to do with these guns? Put them on a wall or in a gallery? No, they're going to sell them back to the criminal element. And we, the taxpayers who bought these and whose money was used to acquire such apparatus, would be the potential victims. So we will be the victims of what we bought for our own protection. But what I really call it to tell you is this. You see morality in Trinidad and Tobago? Morality gone. Because when I was a little boy, there are certain things I don't think people would ever think about doing. For example, breaking in a church, assaulting a religious, like a priest, like Father Harvey here, robbing a priest. Those actions there yesterday, because there's supposed to be a level of trust amongst the organization that this will not happen. I ain't saying the police wouldn't bully somebody but to willfully go in there, kill one of your own, steal the guns. That words can't describe that. And no among the argument about, well, it is unemployment, and because during the last couple of years with the high murder rate, we did have seat up on URPS. But what we failing to understand, we in this country, we have lost our moral bearings. And it's only when it comes home to affect us, then we will speak about it. Now listen off here, good program as usual.
Thank you, Kola. Yeah, here's the thing. The economic pressures is not the biggest motivator. It's a motivator. It might be the difference between some people resorting to a life of crime or not. But the biggest issue that is with regards to our crime right now is the lack of consequence. It's not so much enforcing every little itty-bitty law, ticky-tack law, and the like, but rather a general perception of lawlessness. And we've said this time and time again, from the politicians on down, right? Because which politician is perceived of, you know, they have gang members as their friends, you know, they bring gang members to the president's house, you know, they engage with community leaders, they give out contracts, they go in hot spots with minimal security, and so on and so on. Who thief, who didn't thief, who is viewed as less corrupt. Now, I think, yes, I don't understand why they're trying to say, well, it was an inside job, don't worry about it, it can't happen again. Because the core of it is, we don't know with regards to the officers who were arrested what the involvement was. We don't know to what extent the arrangement was with any other potential suspect that was directly involved. But we know this, officers were involved. Officers are the criminals now. How do you feel safer? We have already had police officers being detained under PDOs. We have already had the TTPS have a station where criminals got access to evidence lockers. We already have situations where the prison service had inmates dying, not charged and convicted. Arrested, and okay, maybe charged, but I can't even remember what they were charged for. If they were charged, right? Arrested, and on the same day, sent to the prisons. This is the attacker, on allegedly, the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons, and then dies for reasons that differ the private autopsy from the official autopsy under questionable circumstances. All of these things happen. All of these things happen. We have citizens watching the lack of Coast Guard presence or response on a regular basis while illegal activity is coming through. Right? There's a perception of lawlessness, but we have also had soldiers that got arrested, soldiers that were identified as part of a home invasion crew. We have also had members of the law enforcement system at times at times allegedly be involved in crimes or acts that are unexplainable. And now we have a situation where, because I think on some level it was fine with too many people in the population. Why? Because, well, it's pests. It's pests, right? The Andrea Barrett suspects, well, they probably killed her. We don't know. We'll probably never know. We just know that 2 suspects are no longer alive after being in police custody. We don't know the circumstance about that. We don't know with regards to their guilt or innocence. We'll never know. But to the population, it wasn't that big a deal because, sure, and I've heard this too many times, why do you care about the safety of the criminals? And why are you trying to protect the criminals and speak up for the criminals? Well, right, so now one of the victims is a fellow police officer that potentially, not from a different police organization, it wasn't some predial larceny officer that was vexed with a TDPS officer and kill him or her. No. Officers of the same entity were part of the death of one of their fellow officers. And this is not no random crime. This is not no, oh, I don't like your head, and we enter an argument and a crime of passion. She was in a police station. They went there. Potentially 6 men deep, if all of the arrested were directly involved. They then proceeded to steal 102 firearms. How does that make us feel safer? Now, here's the thing, because the caller brings up a point. There's this weird situation where if you think about the situation critically, on a practical level, it is not practical to steal guns from the police force to try to sell to criminals, right? Because, again, it's a situation where these guns are more easily traceable. And the police will pay this situation a lot more attention, in part because it's a whole collection that they could backtrack. They already have ballistic testing for, etc., etc. And of course, it's from the police themselves, so they will be on the lookout for certain makes, certain models, and certain numbers, etc., etc. And it will cause anyone who uses these guns to have an extra level of scrutiny and heat placed upon them. So it's not necessarily practical if the criminals care about certain things. But what if they don't? Because as the caller pointed out, we live in a time when even religious leaders, religious figures are not immune to violence. Old people are not immune to violence. One of the sickest things ever is when you read some old lady was raped by young men. And we ain't talking like, okay, 50, no, some real old ladies, the most vulnerable outside of children. And of course, children now have been the victims of murder. And it's not just Christian churches, it was temples, it was mosques, and that's why when they happened, when a temple was desecrated, or a mosque was desecrated, or a church was broken into, I highlighted it. I highlighted the point. What was sacred is no longer sacred. What criminals would not do, they are willing to do. They are willing to cross certain lines that they before would not have crossed. And I mean, if you are inside, man, on a weapons theft to this magnitude, what is sacred? Your own colleague ain't sacred. Your own colleague ain't protected. So they might, the criminals that were involved, which includes potentially 2 municipal police officers, just by the way, right? If those officers are the ones involved in the situation, and they're not just some sort of like preventative suspicion, or if anyone else was involved, on some level, a professional criminal or a police officer, well, then again, they say municipal police don't have the training, should have thought, hey, this is not necessarily the easiest way to make an illegal dollar, right? Look, 6 people have been arrested, and several of the firearms technically have already been confiscated. Part of it is, it's easy to smuggle across, in a car, a handful of guns. 100 guns to get away with. Just the sheer logistics of that bulk. You have to find a place to stash it. You have to operate in a manner where you have a large amount of stuff you're carrying. Hopefully no one notices, hey, we have large amounts of stuff in bags. That can't be suspicious at all. So there's a lot of logistics behind the difficulty as well. But hey, if you have people that necessarily either don't understand or don't care about the difficulties and the risks, they're just saying, we'll do it anyway. We don't care. I am frightened if it is that they know better and still don't care. The implication that police officers were directly involved in this potentially. And they still didn't care about getting caught. That the rewards to them somehow was better off than the risks. And the caller is right. The criminal element doesn't have to be doing any sort of high-end analysis on how risky it is to use a stolen police weapon as opposed to a harder to trace illegal firearm smuggled into the country. They're not necessarily doing their maths. They're just thinking, gun, shoot. I need a gun, this gun works. It will kill people like any other gun. We're going to die before we reach 30 anyway. Do we care if the police, if this gun have extra heat? They ought to catch me first. They ought to catch me first. And yeah, we have potentially armed, well, no longer 100, but at the very least, because there's at least 60-something guns still out there, we have potentially armed 60-something criminals. With regards to gangland hits where you'll see multiple casualties, well, that's what you have the shotguns and MPXs for. With regards to a lot of the violent robberies where they need to be more stealthy, hey, you have all these pistols. And here's the other thing that the caller pointed out. Because maybe this is why the commission is saying that the TTPS was not targeted. Because, let me get back the statement. This was not a targeted attack against law enforcement. Well, let me suspend that point right there. It seems as though the perpetrators identified some sort of limitation or vulnerability in the municipal police station, that specifically, and they exploited it. Right? They exploited a vulnerability. They just exploited a gap, a lacking. Now, not only can potentially such an exploit happen in a police station, maybe it might take more effort because the circumstances won't be exactly the same, but the caller pointed out there are other services that are armed. Right? They have armories and weapons lockers. At some point, the guns have to go somewhere. Criminals will follow the trend. Oh, wait. Police services are one-stop shop for guns and bullets? Who else could we go after? We have a caller from San Fernando. Caller, good morning. You're on here. Caller, morning.
You know, I would like you to have a conversation with, or when you again you have a conversation with Mr. Ali and what's his name, the media ambassador, Christopher Arun. Because the municipal police hierarchy is not as far removed from the police service as they're trying to let us believe. Eh?
Well,
the municipal police service hierarchy comes from the police service.
No, here's the thing though.
Comes from the police service.
I don't
even though it's,
I don't think that they're active in the TTPS anymore. So I believe it's a transfer, and organizationally they are separate and distinct.
Yes, Sean, I know that. However, all of them are career policemen. Okay, so when it's not just a break in the system. They are ACPs, they are senior superintendents, and they come from the police service system. And to get that position, they have to be made when they retire. They have to be made what you call it, SRPs to hold those positions. So they're not as far removed from the system as they would as they want you. They want you to believe that the municipal police are not to do with the regular police. Come on, I have known members of the municipal police when they retired. They went across, and this, as far as they're concerned, they're still policemen. So don't try to. If it is that the oversight is a problem, tell us the oversight is a problem. That they figure they go on there and they have a cushy job. But those are all career policemen and of noteworthy positions within the police service. Now that being said, let me say something quickly. I heard the commissioner of police say twice. The commissioner of police said last week in the chamber meeting, and he said again in the press conference on Sunday, that less than 500 serious criminals. Keep repeating that. So I want to find out from the commissioner how he categorizes the criminality, because it's only the less than 500 serious, obviously serious criminals. They are the ones that had the place in mayhem. So not the not so serious criminals. And just I want to know what is the criteria for making that assessment that is only less than 500 serious criminals. So that is what we have to worry about. The not so serious criminals, we have to worry about them there. How you categorize them? Home invaders are serious criminals, people who going in stores with guns and robbing people and taking people's vehicle from them. Are they part of the 500 less than 500 serious criminals? I want the commissioner to come and I'm surprised that none of these people, when he sits in this press conference, grills him on this. Have a good day, Sean.
Thank you, caller. I mean, yeah, that's a good point. What is the criteria? My thing is, what is the basis of the statement in general, to be honest? Now, you can do a little bit of reverse analysis from the criminal justice side with regards to the court matters. And when you look at the court matters, the sheer volume, now I don't know how severe all the cases are, right? But from what I've been told, from what I understand, the sheer volume of criminal matters, whether minor or major, is so large that unless you want to say that we have a criminal population of around 100,000, there has to be a lot of repeat offenders. There has to be. And what makes it interesting is the fact that you have certain offenders on remand for years. So some of them are kept out or taken out of the general population of society and are removed from the ability to engage in crime. And you still have so many repeat offenders. Is the number limited to 500? What is the basis for just saying it that way? And I do wonder if that is more of a PR statement than a serious analytical one. There might be some basis for it to say that it is potentially the best statistical analysis. I don't know. He is an intelligence officer, but intelligence is one of those weird things. I'll get to that in a bit. We have Digger Martin on the line. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Sean. Crime has gone down, but we still live in fear. That is such a telling statement. We have become a look-back society because we have been conditioned over the last 10 years or so, grappling with homicide, kidnapping, home invasion. Why is that so? That is so because we have had lots of failures of the organization tasked with providing safety and security. Pavlov, basically physiologist who turned psychologist with his experiments, which is conditioning and reward. And what I mean by that, let us focus on the critical crime fighting organization, that is the TTPS. If we look at how that has performed, they basically are conditioned to basically get a reward. They are policing. A lot of those officers were rewarded, senior position on state board, etc. So if you condition them to do the wrong thing, they will do it. Society has suffered because of that. And let me again tell you, going back to how the police respond to information, they are so conditioned, they will act with alacrity with investigation, such that to give them a particular outcome so they can be rewarded. Certain people, certain police officers, and we can't, I suppose to say only a few police officers are bad ones. The number is high. That is where we are grappling with it. For example, the red flags were there with the municipal police. When we lost 25,000 ammunition by the army, have we found out where they are? When I think the Galil was lost in the Sawa Barataria police station, have we found out who basically lost it? And that is what we are faced with. But we have to fix it. And I'm seeing now where they have designated, and that is what the Prime Minister said last year, sorry, not last year, last evening, where a faculty or will be open up to train police officers in forensic DNA and things like that. We needed that sort of meritocracy in the police service, equipping them for intelligence gathering. 10 years ago, we always hear that we forensic, and nothing has happened. We continue to use a recruitment process that is not based on meritocracy. 3 O levels and when you're strong and looking like you could do something, you are being recruited and you work your way up. But that is not the way to populate it, and I'm hoping people doesn't take what I to be political. Is there, for example, alacrity, what I'm telling the police with respect to investigation? It is a serious situation when we have a former junior government housing minister has been associated with the finance of the 7 gangs. Where's the DCP say there is no investigation going on? He went through the whole area, all the division, and nobody seems to want to investigate. The Attorney General come a month ago and said, look, what we have, why does that is not a priority? Go on, Sean. Have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. I mean, the thing that you said about incentivized behavior. First of all, I've said that with regards to the politicians. We incentivize a lot of nonsense out of our politicians. We're part of the problem there. But it's the same thing for the police service. It's the same thing for a lot of areas of the public service. But we see the results with regards to the police service more. Not just because of what may or may not be done or is going wrong with regards to serious crime prevention and serious crime detection, but also just day-to-day interactions with police officers at times. This is the thing. You could actually take the commissioner's model and apply it to the police. Because you're correct, right? But this is why I think, caller, you're correct. There probably is a minority of serious corrupt police officers. Just like how there's only 500 serious criminals. But Similar to how, well, the PNM, at least at one point in time, is viewed as less corrupt. Now, even if that's true, the implication is you are still corrupt. And police corruption, like any corruption in the public sector with regards to elected officials in parliament, etc., or local government, it'll be on a spectrum. Not all of the bad apples in the police service are going to be outright criminal associates. Some of it could just be like bad police who are willfully bad at their job and break rules and regulations in minor ways and dole out unfair treatment in relatively minor ways, but could still have significant impact on the person who is the victim of such treatment. I question officer training with regards to certain categories. Ethical behavior / what is their sense of duty, right? But some of that is with regards to potential deficiencies in society, which goes back to what you say about the incentives. Whether it is the population, whether it is the bosses, whether it is the politicians, in what degree, because you see what's going on in society around you, that will influence you as well. That's why we have so many lawbreakers and road traffic violations and speeding and the like, because enough other people speed, they feel justified to speed at the minimum. There will always be those that want to speed and don't care about the law regardless, but so much more people speed because, hey, everybody's doing it, quote unquote, I should do it too. Other areas where I question police training: customer service, best practice, which is obvious, right? And not easily fixed because, again, our society is not known for its great customer service by default. We have good customer service people in TNT. It's not as though it's just all bad. But as a society, what is the norm? What is the baseline? And then the esprit de corps, the spirit of enthusiasm and pride among members of the organization, for both the organization and for their colleagues, you know, that will help embolden them, bring them together to face difficult circumstances, to face adversity. What is being done to build up the organization, not with regards to one squad, one song, but with regards to borrow a quote from Kevin Costner in The Untouchables, let's do some good. And that's where I understand forensics and the like and whatever. But I think on some level, the basics are too far gone, too far off. In part because as a society, we have allowed ourselves to rot. So when the police candidates come from society, they are affected by the wider rot that we tolerate because we're too casual, we're too complacent overall, right? That's why there's garbage on the streets. That's why there's garbage, not garbage with regards to what might come out of a boat, but just garbage in the waters of the port because people just toss things carelessly. That's why parts of the country are just dirty. That's why so many of our systems of government break down, because the people don't care, in part because the system that they have to work in is a crappy system that has probably more often not proven to them that they don't care about them. Their bosses don't care about them, the system doesn't care about them, the public service doesn't always care about them, so why should they care? So if we want our police to be better than, we need to have training to kind of get them to understand, look, now that you're police, you're not a private citizen in a lot of ways anymore. You have a different level of responsibility if you want to wear this badge. You represent something more than just an institution that is providing you a job. The duty is near sacred. It is almost as sacred as a religious figure. It is no less sacred than a parliamentarian or someone that was elected to a local government body, because the level of responsibility to society, it is not dissimilar to a doctor in the public health system or a firefighter. It is an institution that is beyond just an office with 4 walls and a paycheck, that is beyond just a 9 to 5. It is a vocation, like a teacher. It's not just there for you to put in the hours and collect your check. That type of mentality needs to be instilled in those that want to join police officers. And we can't risk the temptation of, well, we need more bodies, so let's just take anybody. And if we can't get enough candidates, we have to ask why, not lower the standards, not lower expectations. Expectations for things like firefighters, teachers, policemen. It's easy to say expectations for doctors should be high because it's high by default. Teachers, police officers, firefighters, it should be high. Not necessarily academically, but there's more to a man and woman than just their academic credentials. So, and that's why I think you might be correct. There might be many bad eggs, bad apples in the police service. It's just to what degree? What degree? Now the thing is, the Commissioner of Police, as far as I understand, is a former intelligence officer. What do we have from police all the time? We have intelligence, we have intelligence. They can never translate it to evidence. Intelligence is not a fact. Intelligence officers do not work with facts. Facts are undisputed. Intelligence are estimates. Intelligence is taking an incomplete picture and trying to analyze it and to figure out what is essentially their best educated guess on what's going on. Because you don't have facts of what's going on. Intelligence is trying to piece the thing together. Right? Yes, obviously, if they get source of information that will give them facts, that's fine. But anybody could report on facts. An intelligence officer is to try to figure out beyond what the facts tell us, because we're not always going to conveniently have such a treasure trove of information to just put undisputed factual evidence directly on our plate and then we could move on from there. That's why intelligence is not always easily translated to evidence by which you could then charge and convict. Intelligence is working with incomplete information to then try and piece the situation together. And in the case of police, so that they could then figure out the best possible avenue to investigate a situation, to collect evidence sufficient enough to charge. If intelligence was facts, then we won't have this issue with the police having all this intelligence and the SAS and the Protective Services and the National Security Ministry having all this intelligence on criminal activity, but we can't get no convictions because we don't have evidence to arrest and charge. And the Commissioner of Police, as far as I understand, he's an intelligence officer. So I would like to know exactly how he came about with potentially the estimate of 500. I would like to know. Because you need to understand there's a time and place for everything. There's a time and place to give out intelligence estimates. The general public is not always one of them. It's not. Because now you understand the context of why you're saying that. And on some level, we have to question, is there an agenda there? Because you're trying to downplay the situation. But here's the interesting part. If That is the motivation. You mean to tell me that all this nonsense, all of the serious crime, this is the implication of the commissioner's words. You want to tell me that it's only 500 men and you can't do nothing about it with a state of emergency? Because on some level, there might be truth to what he says. We're a small country. A lot of people knows, everybody in their community. So a lot of people will be macroing your business. A lot of people know where the criminals are, and the police know where the criminals are, right? In the specific geographical area that either they live or operate in. We can't do nothing about it. It's only 500. We don't need to arrest all, but if you legitimately arrest and charge and convict, it shouldn't take that much effort to turn things around if it's only 500 criminals. If it's only 500 serious criminals, it shouldn't take that much effort to deal with that. You could start one at a time, literally. Literally just one at a time. That's not an insurmountable mountain if it's just 500, because you don't have to get all 500. You just have to start to chip away at that number until the remainder starts to realize, hey, there's real consequence. Because here's something I thought about this morning. We know for a fact that criminals, whether they're on the run or caught, have professed a lack of concern for their lifespan. And they are more than willing to engage in a gang war that could see them dead, well before their 25th birthday. There are many instances of members who have gone to the media, gone and acted in local movies to portray the life, or gone and done an interview to talk about the life that they have chosen. They don't look nervous, they don't look scared, they don't look uncertain, they seem very sure. They don't care if another gangster decides to roll up on them and attack them. They're ready to fight and die if necessary. This is the life they chose. However, while it is to some extent proven that they are not afraid of a gang war, of having to have an outright, all-out battle with another gang, they are not afraid of street violence. They're not afraid of a Wild West situation where you have the quick and the dead. They're not afraid of that. But one of the things that we don't know for sure is, would they be afraid of state-sanctioned executions if they got the death penalty? Because many a hardened criminal, you could live a life in prison. You're still alive. When a gangster comes to kill you, you could fight back. When you get arrested, charged, convicted, and sentenced to death, how are you fighting that? And maybe some of them are. Maybe some of them, they buy that bravado. They live that. They truly believe that in and of themselves. They don't fear death. But some of them, they might be pretending. They might be pretending because that's what they have to say. If I want to be cool, if I want to be legit, if I want to have street cred, and yes, I know they might not actually use these terms. I'm using it to convey information in terms I think the general public would understand. If they want to be the boss, if they want to have some credibility, I can't look scared. But what if we actually got several of them on death row and the process was not moving at a snail's pace? So the Privy Council ruling won't protect them. What if they actually face the consequence? And I understand the church I have heard priests speak out against the death penalty, but here's the twist. And I can't say that this is a religious argument, right? So I'm going against my own priest here. In theory, if a few suffer the consequence, it sends a message to the many. It's only 500. It won't take a lot. You don't have to have all 500 face the death penalty or all 500 to be in prison for life. You just need to hit them with consequence. You just need to show them that there is consequence. You just need a higher detection rate for murders beyond 10%. You just need to show them that you're taking this situation more seriously and you're not just putting a band-aid with regards to a state of emergency that no longer is stopping mass casualty shootings. Because a few assailants or a couple of assailants saw 3 young men and decided to wipe out that car. And it just so happened that a 9-year-old was in there with them. So we have been for quite some time long past the stage of gangsters killing gangsters. And you can't put all of the responsibility on the victims, because we don't know what those 3 young men did or didn't do. In this country, if you are not from a community and you go into that community and you go too far into that community, you can end up dead. Plain and simple. You don't have to be a gangster. I mean, depending, there'll be questions as to why you're there, but you don't have to be a gangster to end up dead. So, it's funny how, in an attempt, seemingly, maybe this is not the commissioner's motivation, in an attempt to downplay and assuage our fears on the police station attack. Oh, well, it's an inside job and it's a one-off. The police institutions are not being targeted. It's not going to happen. No, because it's an inside job. And now we have to be concerned about police officers conducting an inside job that includes murdering their colleagues and stealing firearms, right? To say that there are only 500 criminals. You mean to tell me that 500 criminals has this country hostage? That's what you're telling me. You're telling me that a police service of several thousand is being outmaneuvered by 500. That a police service with the authority of the state, with the state monopoly on the usage of force, with the full weight of the law and the state of emergency, is being run around in circles by 500 men from the street? That's what you're telling me? That all of the, look, we have 3 ministries now for national security, and the Attorney General is involved as the reporting minister for the SAS or the SSA. So that's 4 members of cabinet. 4 members of cabinet, not including any potential junior ministers in their offices, like the Office of Legal Affairs. I don't know to what extent Minister Hussain is a part of any sort of national security initiative, but land affairs falls under his purview. And also, some of these various police forces, they are under other ministries. So all of these extra ministers, outsmarted by 500 men? 500 men is influencing our young people to the degree that our young people are becoming much more lawless. 500 men? 500 men is all that's involved with all the drug smuggling and gun smuggling and human trafficking. 500 men? But here's the best part. Here's the best part. There is enough to suggest that with regards to human trafficking, at the very least, there are politicians involved. The US said so. And to what extent now does the 500 include those politicians who are close to community leaders? Those politicians who get drug money to finance their campaigns? Don't think it's the PNM potentially alone. Because as far as I know, the Prime Minister is speaking either she's repeating rumors or she's speaking from experience. Because if she had evidence that directly related her political opponents to drug lords, if she had evidence, then why does she not reveal it? Well, then the answer to that is either she has none, or it will expose too many people, not just her political opponents. So maybe it is just 500, because the 500 includes people in the Red House. I don't know, you tell me. All the intelligence in the world. All the intelligence in the world, but 500 people have us in a state of emergency for over a year. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? Thanks to the callers. I don't think we got any comments this morning, so we'll close there. It's 10 o'clock. Folks, this is Talking About the WESN. I'll be honest, I'm just not in the mood to tell you to have a good day today. Be responsible today. Be safe today. Keep your awareness up today. And don't take your loved ones for granted today. Too many families lost children recently under various circumstances. It doesn't matter what they are. What matters is that it happened. Appreciate the day. Remember your allegiance to the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and to each other. That allegiance will at times require you to be more vocal in a responsible manner. I have mentioned it before in various ways. I suggest if you haven't started, do so now. It's nice to be nice, but don't mistake being nice for being complacent. If we are too complacent, it will be difficult, but I would hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.